Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairman, for your leadership. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your great testimony. Extraordinary. Mr. Bernhardt, Maine and Rhode Island have many things in common. Unfortunately, one of them is deteriorating bridges, but I think we have the record where 56% of our bridges are structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. In fact, at one point, we had to close 95 because of a bridge in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. So the major north-south highway in all of New England was sort of slow to a crawl. With that in mind, have you done an assessment of what you need to fix your bridges? And related to that is, to the extent that you don't fix them and they keep deteriorating, it gets worse, I would assume. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. So it was just a few years ago, I had asked a team through my chief engineer to put a team together to do just that. So we did a report, and anybody can get it online. It's Keeping Our Bridges Safe report. And so what it came down to, it took them about a year to put this report together. We have great asset inventory on every one of our bridges. And so what they did is they looked at what we were spending and what was necessary to spend. So we were spending on average around $70 million per year on bridges. And so I asked, are we moving the needle? And the answer was no. And the answer came back that we needed to spend around $140 million per year. And so, one, we have not been able to get to that level yet. We're at around $119 million per year. But one of the things that we looked at heavily is what are some of the trade-offs on the bridges. So there are certain bridges that we have to post. We post down to weight, and we might go fix them, but we might only fix them up to another certain weight just to get a school bus across, a fire truck, a fuel delivery. We might not bring it back to its optimal level. So those are the trade-offs that we have to do. Maine being very rural, spread out, there are certain bridges that we have to get to that 100,000-pound because of the types of vehicles that are crossing them. We're a heavy fiber industry, and some of our bridges have to, so we have to focus on those. And so it's a trade-off.
Let me just raise a point which throughout the course of the hearing I think will come back. That is that if it's a public-private partnership, the private entity has to be able to realize profits, which means the private benefits have to exceed the cost. Simple analysis. In many cases, particularly when it comes to bridges in rural areas or many other infrastructure projects, those private benefits aren't as substantial as the private plus the public benefits, i.e. getting a school bus across the bridge, getting an emergency vehicle across the bridge. So the likelihood of a public-private partnership there is close to zero, but the necessity of fixing the bridge exists, and that calls for much more direct public involvement. Is that your view?
That is my view. That is correct.
Thank you. Let me switch gears slightly, and Ms. Osborne, is that, we tend to categorize projects in terms of rail, transit, highway, et cetera, but the real future is an intermodal transportation. And we have some successful examples. We have an old Navy base, Quonset Point, which has been turned into it's got an airport, it has rail service, it has sea. In fact, it's one of the biggest import ports for automobiles on the East Coast, et cetera. And that was all over 20 years of effort. Also at our airport, we're working very closely to get the trains to stop, MBTA is stopping, et cetera. But one of the things that strikes me is that we have different categories in the programs of federal matches, of federal requirements, et cetera, which sometimes don't encourage intermodal, in fact, discourage it. So you'll go where the money is, literally. Can you comment about that?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right that a lot of our programs are very siloed and kind of put the thumb on the scale for particular modes. If you want to connect two communities by a highway, you can get 80% federal funding. If you want to connect those same communities by transit, it's down to about half. If you want to do it by intercity rail, it's generally about zero. And so people make the logical decision based on where the funding is. through the Fast Lane program, we encourage states to do really thoughtful freight planning that looks at the needs across the state to set the priorities, and then it says, but we'll really only fund the highway ones. And that also sends a very clear indication about where the priority is from this investor. Also, when you're trying to put all those various programs together, it actually is a lot more complicated than it needs to be. And that's just within DOT. You know, that's one agency trying to put together funding for ports and for highways and the various programs. Even between surface and aviation is very complicated. If you then try to bring in funding from other agencies that are authorized by totally different committees, it gets even more complex. When I was at USDOT, we tried to do joint planning grants between USDOT and HUD. And we made joint awards, but when we tried to go and sign grant agreements with the recipients, we had to do 2 separate grant agreements from the 2 agencies because of all their different rules and their cultures. And so it really puts a huge onus on those local leaders to figure out how to overcome all of these different rules and cobble together the funding. And that is why programs like Tiger are so important, because you can come in with a project that has a great objective and you can ignore those silos. You can just come in and say, these are the things we want to accomplish. The methods that we're going to use to accomplish include many different modes, and programs like Tiger can meet that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.